Hi there, it's Ryan Quintel, and we're back for another sketch tutorial. And today we're going to be making a messages list that can contain something like emails or text, and we're going to set it all up to be responsive with symbols and overrides. So let's jump in and get started. So my sketch window here, I'm going to blow it up so it's a little bit bigger for us. I'm just going to hit A and pick an iPhone XS. Nice standard size iPhone. You could do this on any mobile screen size you like, but I'm going with iPhone here. I'll just save my document out so we have a name, and always be saving your work. Always be saving. Now with our document saved, let's make a header and footer. And I'm just going to put in anything for a header and footer. I'm going to make them about 88 pixels tall, or 88 points, whichever you like to say. I'm going to just take those, and I'm going to group them, and I'm going to lock them. And I grouped with Command-G, and then I'm going to hold down Option. Look at this little trick. Go over your layer, hold down Option, and instead of Show Hide, you get Lock Unlock. So I like to do that. It feels good on my thumb. Hit Option, boom, lock. There we go. Now let's make some cells and some lists. And all we really have to do, and this is the best part about symbols and overrides, is we really just have to get one right. So let's dial in and just do one. Why don't we say that our messages list is going to be something like 88 tall. That's about as tall as the header and footer. Maybe that's too big, but we can play with it. Why don't we say this is a messaging application? So we'll do a picture of a user here. I'll change the color so we can see it. And you could pick any old color. It doesn't really matter. We'll do 44. Remember, that's our thumb tappable size on mobile. And then we'll put in some text. So hit T. Why don't we type message title? I'm going to hold down Option and drag that message title, and I get a copy. And all right, message preview goes right here and can extend up to 2 lines. I like to do a nice little, I write it out for myself so I know how it'll behave. Now let's set this in San Francisco. We'll say this is an iPhone app. SF Pro. Yeah, that's looking a little bit better. And we're going to do our message title here. We're going to do that in bold. And I think regular for the message preview is good. Why don't we take this up to, say, 14. And we'll say take this up to 13. Apple likes to use 13 a lot in their font sizes. Go take a look. You'll be surprised, I think. 1, 2. So now I'm spacing everything out, and I'm going to go 24 in from the center. That's a lot of padding, but we'll see if we like it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that. I'm just grabbing those, lining them up. See that smart guide? Clicking right into place. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks a little loose to me, but we'll see what we can do. And then what I like to do to get sizing for things like this is I'll drag my text box out to the edge, and then I'll minus 24 from the width, and this will get me 24 from the right-hand side. So I'll do minus 24 up here in the W, see in the top right up here. 259 is my width. So I'll take this and I'll change it to 259. And just like that, I have 2 stacked boxes right on top of each other. We see they're 2 points apart. Let's get a little bit more comfortable. We'll say 6. I mean, that's a little bit too much. How about 4? Great. Okay, so I'm going to group these. And now I want all of these centered with each other. So I'm going to just click and drag. They are spaced out left to right exactly horizontally how I want them. So I'm just going to go ahead and center align it. And we'll say this is one message title. Maybe what I'll do now tweak a couple of the styles. So maybe I want this to be totally white. And then, this is a fun little trick. You can put little lines in between these. What I like to do is use rectangles. Just because a rectangle can do basically the same look, but it's a little bit more accurate in terms of calculating its width. So I'm going to do just a 1-point line. Ooh, it's a hairline. And I'll use a fill of gray. Now I'm just going to put the line on the bottom. We can talk about that in a second. And then for the fill on this, I'll leave it alone. I'll select it all. And then up here in my toolbar, and if you don't have this little convert layers into reusable symbols, if you don't have that icon, you can right-click in your bar in an empty space and go to Customize. And look at this. All sorts of knickknacks and doodads. My bar is always custom, so I'm always dragging things in. I love Create Symbol being right up there. So I've got all these selected. I'm going to create the symbol. And let's call it Message Cell. And now just like this, I can take my message. You can see it's a symbol now on the left-hand side. It's 89 tall. And I can click and drag. And you're thinking, well, it's just like a group. Well, if you've never used symbols before, you're in for a treat. And if you have used symbols before, you know why this is great already. Look at that, a bunch of these. We'll make an extra one. So now what I'll do is I'll select all these. And I like to use a plugin, but there is a little button here that says Tidy. And Tidy kind of just stacks them all on top of each other with 0. So now just like that, I can take these and maybe drag them around a little bit, and I'll put them under my header and footer so I can see how much I get. Now generally, when I'm doing a design like this, I like to have at least half of a message peeking, or enough so that you see that there's another message down here. So these might all be a little bit too tall. We'll see. Or they're not tall enough, depending on how big we want to make them. Okay. So this is a pretty good starting point, but we want to make some tweaks. I think that this is probably too much spacing for our avatars here, and maybe we want to show little arrow icons and stuff so that we know that you can tap into these. These are threads. So I'm going to take any one of my cells, and now Sketch has changed this recently. It's true now that you can override stuff right on a symbol, but I'm going to try and click somewhere where I'm not clicking on text, and it takes me to my symbols page. So I just double click, and now I'm in my symbols page. And let's tighten up everything here and get some more message density. I'm going to bring this circle to the left, and I'm going to tap it in 10, 11, 12. Now this is only going to be 12 away. 10, 11, 12. Just like that. Now, I'll show you again. If you don't know, hold down Shift on your keyboard to jump 10, 11, 12. Great. Now, I'm going to fill in my avatar here. And one of my favorite Sketch integrations is I can come up here and say, Sketch Data Faces. There we go. There's a face. She looks like a professional young woman. Here we go. What else? Wow. I love the color there. Let's do it. And now, when I'm using these inside of here, and now if you have a group, watch this. You command click on something, and you can jump right inside the group in the layers list. So when I have these things, I like to make sure all my layers are in the correct order. I'm going to change this from message title to just title. And then from message preview to just preview. I like to name all these things very precisely, and we'll talk about a little bit later why in overrides. Instead of oval, why don't I call it avatar? Instead of rectangle, copy to, why don't we have it called divider? Instead of rectangle, how about just background? Now, why don't we try and make this a little bit smaller just so we can fit more messages on screen. Let's say we want a lot of messages to be shown. So I will go down 13 pixels. And why am I going down 13? I'm going to account for this extra pixel I'm taking up at the divider. I'm going to say 88 up here. And there's two ways to do this. I can do minus 13 and hit enter. I know that's hard to see, so let me change the color. There you go. And it gives me 75. Or another way to do it is I can put my cursor up here, and just like I was scooting it around with shift, I can press shift down arrow, 10, 11, 12, 13. Just like that. Okay. Now I can take these, and I'm going to say there's 0 apart. This, of course, gives me a new visual center point, so I'll select my 3 objects and just like that, align them. And then you'll also notice that these are now a little bit too far away from the side, but we're going to use this to our advantage because maybe we said we want to do an arrow. Here's a really quick arrow. So I'm going to just make a square. And by the way, you can do that by pressing R for rectangle, holding down shift, right? And let's say we want a 16-point square. I'm going to change it to borders, turn off the fill. I'm going to put it to center instead of inside. And then I'm going to use the scissors. Now, the scissors aren't normally in your toolbar, so you're going to have to do that customized toolbar trick I showed you earlier to get the scissors. Take it, snip, snip. You can get to scissors in the menu too. And then I press escape. And then I hit Command-Shift-R, and that puts me in rotate. And I hold down shift to stick to degrees. Look at that. Whoa, yeah. All right. 45 degrees is exactly what I want. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. I could have come up here and typed -45. That would have done it as well. So now I've got this arrow. Maybe that's black too. Ooh, it's a little bit big. Why don't we half its size? Well, you can do math here too. So instead of 16, I'm just going to say divided by 2. We know that'll be 8. That looks about right. Then I'll center it there. And then one thing I like to do is for symmetry and alignment, I'll take my avatar, I'll make a copy, put it to the right, 10, 11, 12. And now I can center visually. Let's change the color here so we can all see it together. I can center visually this arrow inside of this circle. And then I can make the circle transparent by unchecking its fill. Select them both and hit Command-G and group them. And what I get here is an arrow with a bunch of padding around it. So I know exactly, look at that, I'm taking up too much space with my words now. So I'm going to bring those in to their very limit, and then maybe even back them off 6 pixels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm pressing down on the arrow key. So now these are 6 pixels away, so they'll have a little bit of breathing room if a word goes really long. We'll say and, duh. See, it won't get too close to my arrow, so we don't have any visual conflicts there. Okay, let's clean this up a little bit. We'll make this white, or maybe make it slightly off-white. We can pick a more attractive gray than this. I'm selecting my divider. Why don't we go down over here to the blues and give me a cool gray. Speaking of cool gray, I'm going to take this and add it to my document colors, this light cool gray. Maybe I'll even add this super light gray I made. And then here, I'm going to select the preview. I'm going to take my cool gray from document. I'm just going to pull it down and a little bit to the right. There we go, right about there. I'm going to add this color too to my document. And your document colors are colors only used in this particular document, so they'll always be there when you come back. So now I've got a title, a preview, an avatar, an arrow, and I've got some extra space in this. So I like to click the artboard and just use this little fit button up here and watch this. Bonk. All right. We've got ourselves a fit. Fit as a fiddle. So now, let's hit return to instance. And look at that. We've got a bunch of avatars and a bunch of symbols already. I'm going to hit Command S and save. And then I'm going to take all these. I'm going to just select them in the layers list. And then do the tidy one more time and say 0 between them. And now it looks like I can get a peek of an additional message. And I'm getting a whole additional message on screen, which is great. If you're looking at a messages list, you probably want to see the messages. So now we can get a lot of them. Maybe too many, right? You're going to have to decide for your app or for your use if it makes sense. But that's what I like to do. All right. Now, let's take this thing to the next level. I'm going to save. And then if we take these message cells and we start squishing them left and right, you can see what happens here. It kind of becomes a mess. The message title looks weird if we want to make them longer. We're stretching things. Our arrow is stretching. So if I have this whole canvas, if I come over here and say adjust content on resize, and I select that artboard, then as I select the artboard and move the artboard around, you'll see. That doesn't look right, right? Let's set up some rules. So we'll do that by going back into our symbol with a double click. We'll set up some rules. So I'm going to say this avatar right here. Under resizing, I'm going to say pin it to the left. And you'll see, look at that preview. It stays to the left. Now I'll say it stays the same width and height, too. Same thing here with my 2 lines of messages. Those are pinned left. And maybe we'll just leave it there. Maybe I'll pin it right, too. And they'll stay. And this here, this group is great because it respects all the padding. I'm going to say fix its size. I'm going to click towards the center and look at doing up and down and left and right. And I'm going to say pin it to the right. For the background, I'm going to just say pin all over. And for the divider, I'm going to say pin to the bottom, right and left. So now I've got all these rules set up. Let's give it a test. Let's test it out. Ooh, So now we see them going up to 3 lines. If you really want to do good 3-line support, you may have to get, say there's a little funkiness with them going up and down. But overall, you've got something that flows nicely, and it respects your avatar and your arrow, which is great. Let's take this back to, instead of custom, we'll say iPhone XS, which is what we had. You saw everything resize itself and fit nicely. Now let's try this. I'm going to select a bunch of these. I'm going to come into my data. Click on faces again. Whoa! Now we've got a bunch of different faces in there, and yes, they're all controlled from the same symbol. So if you've never used symbols, this is the power of symbols. Now I'm going to select all of these, come up to data, say sketch data names. And just like that, I've got a bunch of cool names. Look at the accent marks and everything in there. And now, why don't we say for the preview, we'll just delete this stuff. And you can do this double-clicking on the words themselves and just deleting. That's how I like to do it now. That's pretty new for Sketch. Double-click, delete, and then I'm hitting Command-Enter to confirm. So I'm doing most of this with just a couple clicks in my keyboard. Almost anything you can do in product design software, you can do with a couple clicks in the keyboard. I'm going to hide my group. Whoa, cool name. Simon. Down there. We have a bunch of message previews. I'll turn back on my headers. So, we've got avatars. We've got a message list. We've got our arrows punching to the new things, and you can do whatever you want. If you want to double click and type little messages. Hey man, I thought we were gonna design some products today. He's really into it. The exclamation point and the question mark. Oh yeah. Look at that. Great. So a lot of new faces in there and a lot of preparation. But in the long run, what we get is a pretty flexible message list that if we're patient, let's try this. We still got time. We didn't take too long, right? We still got time. I'll lock my header and footer. What if we say this message title, it also pins to the top. And this also pins to the top. So now what we're doing there is if we have one person who has a little bit extra to say. So, I thought you said you like The Shining, but then I found out you only saw the movie. I'm a book reader all the way. Now, she's saying something pretty enthusiastically that I probably enthusiastically disagree with. But let's size up this column now to see how it matches. And look at this. Now, our avatar is staying centered in the column. The arrow is staying centered. And here's a good way to size. So if you're looking at one of your previous, you can drag up, or even better, I just hit R and do a little size from the baseline. It's about 15 pixels away to the bottom. So why don't we take this, and to the height we'll add 15, and that brings us to 106. And now she is a double tall cell, which may have the side effect of hiding one of our friends down there. Look at that. Trying to come in. Oh, hey, you forgot about me. I hit tidy. We'll say we'll scroll a little bit so we see. There we go. So if you do double cells, you might find yourself wishing that you had sized it appropriately. But because of the preparation we did, and by the way, you can treat this any way you want. I can go into this symbol and say, this thing should also pin to top this avatar here. And then you'll see that'll stay nice and aligned with your username in case you wanted it to grow that way. You're really in charge. You know, it's your product. It's your world. And, you know, you just want to follow good practices. So you want to make it clear. Yeah, I sort of prefer the center arrow. I'm going to just go back and undo that here. So you just want to follow good practices. You want to show users that there's another screen away, potentially, with an arrow, or you want to make sure that you're giving them a little bit of a peek of another message. I can take this and just edit it down to 2 lines. I right-click, I can say set to original size, and it goes to the old size that it was. I'll hit tidy, and we're back at our extra preview. So you want to show messages. You want to suggest to the user that there's something behind the scroll. You want to suggest to the user that there's another place, potentially, with one of these cells. And then if you're doing things like showing a message list, a preview is a great way of making sure someone has context before they jump into a conversation. Heck, let's do this last thing just because I think it would be fun. I'm going to unlock my group and ungroup my group. I'm going to change them to my light gray. I'm going to take 2 random messages in the list. I'm going to make sure my header and footer aren't selected. Tidy them to 0. So now I have enough messages. They're going beyond the screen, right? I just grouped them. Sent to beyond the screen. And this is a wonderful effect. You take the header and footer, just shift select so you get both of them. Then you can come here, turn down the alpha just a little bit so you can see through. Then for blurs, turn on a blur. And instead of a Gaussian blur, let's do a background blur. We'll take it down to 5 and we'll saturate it up. And that pulls in the color. And we can see now as our list scrolls. Let me get in close so you can see it a little bit better. We can see as our list scrolls. You know, maybe we need to do a little borders on it itself. Outside we'll do our dark border. Same thing up here. Turn on the border. Dark outside. And now we can see our users going behind the list. So you can see it on a scroll, even more context. And you know what? As long as we're borrowing styles, we could do two things here. I just copied the title, the message title. And this would be a little bit more of a classic iOS way to do it, right? If we said messages or something here and we left room for our notch and our status bar and the whole thing. But maybe a little bit more of a contemporary way to do it. Bring it to the left, push it over that 12 that we talked about. I'll left align it, and we'll way bring up the size. And here, I'll do semi-bold, and I'll bring in the characters a little bit. So I think here, when we're seeing this, this makes the case for a little bit more of the indent. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think the 24 definitely looks nicer there. And then we'll be more subtle. Why don't we take this border and turn it off? And for the color, we're going to do a gradient. And we're going to go from absolutely see-through to absolutely white. We're going to make sure that absolutely white is at the top. It's a little bit hard to see. And now we can turn off our blur. Select our gradient again, and we'll make sure that it hits white before you get into messages. We'll make our header a little bit bigger. 120. It's big now. It's big now. And maybe we'll make it our light gray instead. Light gray, but see-through. And so now you can have an app toolbar. You can even bring this down even more, depending on how padded you want this to be. And then as the user scrolls, they get a nice fade. And of course you'd want to maybe do some transitions or have this shrink up so when the user scrolls they get more screen space. But that's all different ways that you can design a messages screen for yourself, for your app inside of Sketch, setting it up with symbols, responsiveness, and playing with a header and footer. I hope you have a good day and keep creating.